Hi everyone. Today the CBI made its closing arguments in one of the most sensational murder trials that have ever happened in our country. This is the Aarushi-Talwar-Hemraj murder case. According to the CBI, it is the parents Rajesh and Talwar who killed their 13-year-old daughter and Hemraj, their domestic servant. But I believe that this investigation and this trial will go down as one of the biggest scandals in our legal history. Most people, both in the media and ordinary citizens, do not know the facts of this case. The facts of this case point hugely and dominatingly, overwhelmingly to the Talwars' innocence. First of all, the UP police on the days of the murder, the day the murder was discovered, completely botched the case. They did not seal the scene of crime. They did not break open the terrace door where Hemraj's body was found. And 2 days later, when on the insistence of the family itself, when that door was broken and Hemraj's body was found, the UP police called a press conference, putting out an outlandish honor-killing theory, where they said that Dr. Rajesh Talwar killed both of them because he found his daughter and his servant in a compromising position in her bed. Now this theory, on even simple scrutiny, absolutely does not hold good. The CBI itself has argued in its closure report that there is no evidence and no motive against the Talwars. Yet bizarrely, it continues to say that the needle of suspicion rests upon the Talwars. Why do they argue this? They argue this on the most simple and, I would say, simplistic mathematical equation that because there were 4 people in the house that night and 2 ended up dead, that the other 2 are responsible. Now the Talwars are in this Kafkaesque position where there is actually a lot of evidence to show that they were not the only people in the house that night. There were 3 other servants who were friends of Hemraj's who were there that night, and there is a lot of evidence to show that they have in fact admitted to their crime, but this is not allowed to be part of the trial. To make you understand this case, I need to take you through some of the steps and some of the details, because unfortunately, justice lies in the details. As I told you, when the CBI filed its closure report in 2012, they themselves admitted that there was no evidence and no motive that they could ascribe to the Talwars. Yet they insisted that it is the Talwars that they suspect. Why did they suspect the Talwars? They argue that no parents can sleep through the murder of their daughter. They argue that although there was absolutely no trace of Hemraj's blood or semen or hair or skin in Arushi's room, which absolutely makes the honor-killing theory go out of the window and so absolutely removes the motive for the Talwars to even kill their daughter or the servant. So even while they admit all of this, they then argue that it is the Talwars who cleaned the scene of crime. Now even that doesn't hold good, because if the Talwars had cleaned the scene of crime, how is it possible for them to selectively clean Hemraj's blood and let their daughter's blood remain on the bed and the walls and the floor of the room? Was Hemraj's blood in blue that they could remove his blood and leave their daughter's blood? Further, although they are accused of having cleaned the scene of crime, the truth of the matter is that there is a huge bloody palm print, a full palm print on the wall of the terrace. There is a bloody footprint on the floor of the terrace. There was blood found on the door of the terrace. There was a whiskey bottle found with blood on it on the dining table of the Talwars. And there were 3 bottles found in Hemraj's room which also had blood on it. And yet, this is the state of the forensics in this country, that both the UP police and all our forensic departments have been unable to trace any fingerprints. They have been unable to do satisfying DNA tests on any of these forensics. And the reason for this is not because the Talwars were some magical, genie-like criminals capable of wiping out fingerprints from or DNAs from these blood prints, but because the UP police failed to seal the scene of crime. People, media, relatives, neighbors were allowed to walk through that crime scene, so that pretty much all the forensics have been botched. But not only that, the day that Hemraj's body was discovered, it is the Talwars that insisted that the door be broken down. Would you believe it? That the police not only did not break the door down, but they forgot to break the door down on the day of the murders. There are many other obvious reasons why the Talwars are presumably innocent. When this closure report was filed, if they indeed had been the murderers, they would have sighed with relief and continued with their life. But the truth of the matter is that it is the Talwars that went to the courts asking for the closure report to be withdrawn and for the investigation and the case to continue. Is this standard behavior of murderers? When the forensic departments in our country have been unable to get to the bottom of this, the Talwars have written innumerable letters to the CBI urging them to send both the whiskey bottles, the bottles that were found in Hemraj's room, the bloody palm print, the footprint, the mattress, the bloody sheets in which their daughter was found, every possible piece of evidence. They have been pleading with the CBI that it should be sent to experts in America and UK who I believe are capable of solving 30-year-old crimes. But the CBI has failed to do this. Is this standard procedure? Is this standard behavior for murderers? But let's not just go with presumptions. There is a shocking piece of evidence, a series of shocking pieces of evidences, I should say, that point to the fact that there were indeed other people in the house that night. After the UP police had botched the case, this case was given over to a CBI team under the director Arun Kumar. At that point, the case was carried on in a fairly fair manner. The Talwars were held as one set of suspects, but the CBI also found that there were 3 other servants who had gained entry into the house that night. People argue that the Talwars are guilty because there was no forced entry. But the truth of the matter is that there was no forced entry because Hemraj used to have the keys to the house, his room was inside the house, and he let his friends enter in a completely friendly entry. Now both the Talwars and the set of servants, which includes a man called Krishna, were put through 2 lie detector tests, 2 polygraph tests, and through narco-analysis tests. The Talwars came absolutely clean on all these tests. They showed absolutely no deception and absolutely no awareness of the scene of crime. The servants, however, showed deception in the lie tests and the polygraph tests, and in the narco-analysis tests, they gave a blow-by-blow account of how they had murdered both Aarushi and Hemraj that night. Unfortunately, almost nobody knows this. Arun Kumar held a press conference where he gave his findings from these narco tests, and after these tests were done, they raided Krishna's house. They found a kukri which had blood on it, and absolutely explosively, they found a pillowcase in Krishna's room which had blood on it. Do you know what is the fate of both these pieces of evidence? The kukri that had blood on it has been given to a serologist who says that it is not human blood, it is not chicken blood, it is not dog blood, and it is not cow blood. But he is unable to tell us what blood it is. The Talwars have been pleading that this go for advanced DNA testing, but it has not been sent for any further tests. And we are not explained, or nobody knows whose blood this belongs to. Secondly, that pillowcase was sent to the Hyderabad Forensic Laboratory. The Hyderabad laboratory sent back an absolutely explosive report where they said that this blood on the pillow of Krishna found in Krishna's room was the blood of the murdered man, Hemraj. This is absolutely material evidence to show that there is a connection between the murdered man and Krishna. But do you know what is the fate of this piece of evidence? The CBI forgot to look at this report for 18 months. They filed their closure report without even being aware of this forensic report. It is only when the Talwars went to the higher courts to appeal that the investigation should go on, and bizarrely, the judge ordered a trial against them as the sole accused, and it is they who got the case papers. It is they who noticed this report. When they went to the Allahabad High Court, trying to bring this material evidence to the High Court's notice, the CBI argued, caught on the wrong foot, it argued that this was a typographical error. There is absolutely no correspondence between the CBI and the Hyderabad Forensic Laboratory for 18 months of this investigation. There are no questions raised, there is no acknowledgement of this report, and in his cross-examination, when Arun Kumar was asked how he believes this was a typographical error, he says he just believes it, and he admits that he made no communication with the forensic department, but that he thought that when the trial came up, he would confront both the Talwars and the forensic department with his belief that this is a typo error. I have personally seen that report. There is no way that it could be a typo error because it describes the pillowcase in great detail over 3 pages. This is not all. After he argued about this ridiculous typographical error, 10 days after that, the Hyderabad Forensic Department said that since the CBI believes it's a typo error, we also believe it is a typographical error. Can you believe that our access to justice, our capacity to solve murders, our capacity to solve crimes rests on such flimsy arguments, and that these can pass in our criminal jurisprudence? The trial under which the Talwars are currently being examined points only to them as the accused. So they are in this Kafkaesque position where they have to prove that they were not the only 2 people in the house that night, but they are not being allowed to present any evidence or have access to any papers that can show that these 3 other servants were there that night. They have gone both to the High Court and the Supreme Court repeatedly, asking for witnesses that they are being denied, asking for access to these narco tests, they've been denied that. Each time that unjust ruling is given to them, they knock on the higher courts and they're told that they're merely delaying the process of justice. The reason I'm interested in this case is not because just the colossal tragedy of 2 parents losing their only child and being perversely accused of that murder without, as I'm saying again and again, the CBI and the police admitting without any evidence and without any motive, you're still accused of the murder. And when they try to access the legitimate sources of justice available to them, which is to knock at the court's door, they are denied that. But again, the story doesn't end here. After the first CBI team went about this in a fair manner, they were suddenly removed from the case, and a second CBI team came into the picture under a man called Mr. Kaul. Under Mr. Kaul and the public prosecutor Mr. Saini, the case has taken inexplicable twists and turns. Suddenly, the murder weapon was no longer a kukri. It became surgical scalpel by surgically trained people and a golf club. Under the second CBI team, the case inexplicably took some unreasonable, difficult to explain twists and turns. For one, the post-mortem reports suddenly changed. In the beginning, the post-mortem reports had said that there was no indication of sexual intercourse or any abnormal activity or any abnormal signs around Arushi's private parts. And the same was said about Hemraj. But after the second CBI team came, 18 months into the case, it was suddenly alleged that Arushi's vagina was abnormally dilated and that a white discharge was found there. When this postmortem doctor was cross-examined, he said that the reason he did not say this in his first report was because it was his subjective finding. The doctor who investigated Hemraj said that the reason he believes that Hemraj and Arushi were having intercourse was because Hemraj's penis was swollen. But when he was cross-examined and he was asked to admit whether all of Hemraj's body was swollen or not due to extreme putrefaction, he admitted that this was indeed the case, that his entire body was putrefied as it lay out in the summer heat for 2 days. But he still said that the swollen penis indicated sexual activity. When he was asked on what he was basing this, he said it was on the basis of his experience from his own marriage. Is this the criminal jurisprudence on which our destinies are going to lie? But not only that, the murder weapon suddenly was no longer a kukri, but it became a surgical scalpel used by surgically trained people, in addition to golf clubs that had been used to bludgeon the two to death. First of all, the golf clubs were not the original murder weapons. When they were deemed to be the murder weapons, it is the Talwars who gave them the entire golf set. If these were indeed the murder weapons, they had had many months to hide them, but they did not hide them. They voluntarily gave it. For the longest time, we were told that one of these golf clubs was cleaner than the rest, indicating that they had cleaned the murder weapon. But as it turned out, and when you read the reports, you'll find that the report says that one of the golf clubs, under a microscope, was marginally in the groove of the iron, the number that indicates the iron bar, was marginally cleaner than the rest. And now hold your breath. The club that was marginally cleaner than the rest is not the club that the CBI alleges to be the murder weapon. Not only that, they have alleged that it was a surgical scalpel, but they have failed to produce a surgical scalpel in the trial court. It is the Talwars that produced a dentist's scalpel, and the biggest that a dentist's scalpel blade can be is 6 millimeters or 7 millimeters. Impossible to use that to slit people's throats from side to side. But what is even more weird is that today, when the CBI made its closing arguments, suddenly even the surgical scalpel theory had gone out of the window, and they argued that perhaps it was a kitchen knife. They have been unable to produce this murder weapon, they've been unable to produce this kitchen knife, but they argued in court that since every house has a kitchen knife, it is quite plausible that the Talwars would have used one. Of the many absurdities involved in this case, one of the most striking absurdities for me is that in the closure report, Mr. Kaul argued that the reason why he is letting off the servants and exonerating them from even being in the zone of suspicion is that he argues that there is no way the three servants would have had the courage to be drinking or congregating in Hemraj's room while the Talwars were in the house. And yet, bizarrely, he continues to argue that it is extremely plausible for a 13-year-old girl who has absolute access to friends, is a happy person in school, and has no history of dysfunction with her family. He believes that it is absolutely plausible for this 13-year-old girl to be screwing her 45-year-old servant in the room next to her parents while her parents are in the house. So he finds it impossible to believe that the servants would have the courage to congregate in the house, but he finds it plausible to believe that a 13-year-old would be doing this with her servant in the house while her parents are there. But the list of absurdities is so vast that one doesn't know which one to pick. For instance, this business about the internet router. It has sunk into everyone's subconsciousness that this internet router was going on and off, on and off, on and off that night, and that this proves that the Talwars were awake and that the father is a murderer. First of all, I'd like you to apply your mind and ask, if a father has just murdered his daughter, why would he be putting a router on and off, on and off? Secondly, there is no sign that there was any sites that were being surfed that night. So it's only the fact that the switch was going on and off, on and off. But for anybody who's read the closure report, you will find that the CBI itself has discarded that internet router business because the next day, in the presence of the police, the internet router was still going on and off. And yet, bizarrely, today when the CBI made its closing arguments, it yet again brought up this issue of the internet router. One of the other reasons why people believe that the Talwars are responsible for this murder is because how could they sleep through the killing of their child while they were in the house? But before I come to the evidence on that, first just ask yourselves, have houses never been robbed while you were inside the house? Have people never slept through their doorbells being rung by, say, the Kudawala in the morning? Or you've been stalled somewhere and you've phoned your friends or your dear ones and they've slept through your phone call in the middle of the night? It is perfectly plausible with air conditioning on that you could sleep through this, especially as it is not the UP police or the CBI's theory that there was any scuffling during the murder. By the postmortem report as well as the police's own theory, she was murdered in her bed as she lay, and there was no scuffle involved in that. So where do we imagine the sound would have come from? But secondly, a 7-member AIMS committee team did a sound test within the house, and they found that it was perfectly plausible for the Talwars to have slept through with the air conditioning on in both rooms and not have heard a sound. Secondly, they also came to the conclusion that Hemraj had been killed in the terrace and not in Arushi's room. This completely blows the whole idea of honor killing out of the window. And in fact, if you see the pictures of the terrace, there is further proof to show that Hemraj was indeed killed in the terrace. And yet, when the second CBI team came, all of this was cast aside, and a new man called Mr. Dahiya was brought into the case, who filed a fresh crime reconstruction report. And if you read this report, it is like a Khap Panchayat's mind on overdrive. It is full of the most salacious leaps of imagination, based on absolutely no facts, and it is based purely on the emanations of his own mind. To understand this, I urge you to read the primary material. Read my story, read these reports, read the cross-examinations, and then you will understand the colossal injustice that is being done to the Talwars. It is not my argument that the servants should now be deemed automatically the murderers. My simple argument is that this trial should be undertaken in a fair manner, and if indeed one finds that there is no evidence against anyone, possibly it is more fair that this murder goes down as an urban legend that cannot be solved, rather than that 2 people should be falsely accused for the loss of their own daughter. There are many other facts to this case that I would like to bring to your notice, but I have written personally a 10,000 word story entirely based on the case papers, the cross-examinations and the forensics, and I would urge you to read that. There are just a few other things that I'd like to say. The reason why I am putting myself out on this case is not because I'm questioning the intent of the courts, but because I believe, both as a citizen and a journalist, it is our duty to apply our mind to the evidence as well as the outcomes of court decisions. Secondly, Tehelka's journalism in the past has made important contributions to many cases. The Jessica Lal murder case, for instance, was reopened based on a sting investigation that we did. The Naroda Pathya case in the Gujarat riots was based to a large extent on the investigation done by my colleague Ashish Khaitan. Even the Muslim boys who were put away for the Malegaon blasts and the Ajmer Sharif blasts have been released from jail on the basis of investigations and stories done by Tehelka, including one which showed that there were Hindutva groups that were involved in these 2 blasts. So the point I'm trying to make is that it is important, while we continue to believe in our courts and in our justice system, it is important for us to apply our mind, to break through the prejudice that has been created by media coverage, and to keep on scrutinizing and questioning the process by which cases are adjudicated. This is not to question the judgment of the judge, but to question the process of a trial. Secondly, I'd like to address a question which often arises, which is, why should the CBI be going out of its way to harm the Talwars and protect the servants? Clearly, neither group are extremely powerful people, so what could be the motive of the CBI? Personally, I would not like to hazard speculative theories about this, but having looked at this case in great detail, the only conclusion that I can come to is that the second CBI team is one operating out of a position of extreme prejudice, because I have seen the way that they have discarded the investigations of the first team. And secondly, that my belief is that this is a kind of fraternal protection of each other. Because if the Talwars are exonerated, they will certainly demand accountability from the UP police and the CBI teams and the list of other people who have gone out of their way to besmirch the memory of a 13-year-old girl and who have put them through the hell of not only losing their child, but of being blamed for it. The UP police clearly botched the case in innumerable ways. They would have to answer for that. And my only understanding of why this case is completely gone off the rails into an area of extreme and obvious injustice is only this, that it is operating on a position of prejudice and it is designed to protect those who failed in the line of duty. As I said earlier, this is not the full gamut of facts that I would like to put out to you, but I would like you to at least begin to question what is happening in front of our eyes and to understand that this has implications not just for these two people, but for all our security as citizens in this country. Thanks for listening in.